Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be going over the list of stocks that cut their dividends. I'm going to be explaining to you how I spent my $2,000 government emergency benefit check, and then on top of that, we're going to look at some of the mistakes the World Health Organization made. So ladies and gentlemen, I look so forward to breaking this down for you, so let's jump right into this.
Drop it.
Welcome back, my passive income investors alike. And before we get into all the companies that have been doing dividend cuts, and before I share with you my fat $2,000 government check and what I plan on buying with this, because I am going to be buying some stocks, I want to touch base on something that's more conspiracy based and more political based. And don't get me wrong, I'm Canadian. I don't care about Trump. Don't beat me up in the comments, because every time I bring Trump up, usually someone complains. But this is some really weird stuff, and it's something that's going to carry forward even beyond the pandemic when this all blows over. But we're talking about the WHO, the World Health Organization. Is Trump just cut funding, and they fund this company $500 million a year.
I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus. Everybody knows what's going on there.
And why did they do this? Well, the World Health Organization is exactly what it says it is. It's out there to protect our health and all the economies and the way the world functions. And they were getting fed news from China when China was saying, look, this isn't a big deal what's going on in Wuhan. Things are going to be fine. It's going to blow over. Keep the airports open. And it's been leading to these weird conspiracies that China was kind of forcing the spread of this disease throughout the entire world. And that is a bold, big statement, and I don't know any grounding facts behind that. But the World Health Organization, when Trump said, look, we're cutting flights off to China, they said you don't need to worry about it. And then the entire world fell apart, leading a lot of speculation around why did the World Health Organization tell people to leave the airports open? Don't worry about traveling to China. They seem to be buddies with China, and they just took that at face value and didn't go into the country and do their own homework. And they're going to be under some extreme scrutiny from here on in, guys. So it's going to be neat to see if they get villainized for all of this. And they might very well become the villain of this pandemic, because it was their job. They get paid billions of dollars to figure this stuff out, and they failed miserably. So it's going to be neat to see how this goes forward. I'd love to know what you guys think about that in the comments section below. But setting all of that aside, let's start talking about the companies that have done some pretty major dividend cuts. It's not the full list of dividend cuts. They're some of the largest companies in their own individual sectors that'll help us gauge out where the economy sits. And obviously, to start it all off, guys, we're talking about things like Boeing and Delta. They just finally announced that they're cutting their dividends. And if you plan on buying into the airlines, don't buy into it presuming you're getting a paycheck anytime soon. Buy into it presuming when the economy comes back that they're going to bring their dividend back, and you're probably going to be getting a pretty absurd yield into that future. That's why I still find them attractive. Mind you, I haven't dipped my toes into the airlines yet. And now we're talking about things like Marriott, and the hotels finally announced that they're cutting their dividends back pretty substantially. And these are companies, again, guys, if you believe in the leisure and travel sector like the Carnival Cruises of the world and the hotel chains, I mean, there is some very attractive stuff out here. If this fits your kind of your risk tolerance level and your set of circumstances, I think you could pick up some pretty substantial deals that might pay off very well going into the future. Now, companies that I'm not a big fan of, we're talking about the auto sector. A lot of people talking about Ford right now, and Ford was primarily a very popular stock for paying its dividend. So when it cut its dividend for the first time in like decades, well, the stock took a huge plummet along with that. So we can see that Ford's been in the toilet. A lot of the automakers competing with Tesla. And if you asked a kid that he had to pick one car, whether it was the Ford EV or the Tesla EV, we all know everybody's going to be picking up those Teslas. The only company I like is Tesla, because let's be real, the branding power is unbelievable. So I'm going to be avoiding the auto sector altogether. But moving into another weird sector, we're talking about the mining companies right now, which have been getting shut down left, right, and center. So we saw some pretty fat dividend cuts across the entire mining industry. Obviously, all the restaurant chains that exist out there, whether you're holding like the KFCs of the world, the Taco Bell like companies, guys, we're going to also talk about Darden Restaurant, something I don't discuss discussed very often, that just did a massive, massive dividend cut. And if we want to talk about the restaurants, clothing brands, oh my goodness, things like Nordstrom, anything related to clothing, or you have to go in and get fitted for whatever. I mean, people aren't lining up to buy clothes right now, guys. So I think these are going to be some of the worst hit companies out there until things start recovering, especially in the malls. But we're looking at an 8.4% dividend that just got, I think, slashed to zero for the time being. Moving into the oil sector, guys, with the Warren Buffett-like stocks, we're talking about Occidental Petroleum. This one has been a very hyped stock, and we can see that it's paying a 24% dividend yield. Not anymore. That thing got cut in half, guys. They're dealing not only with the recession, with nobody flying, nobody driving, and now that even though Saudi and Russia came to a deal on the oil prices, there's nobody using oil. So it was just a bad storm that all came together for this company, and it's kind of crazy that Buffett owns it. Do I think this is an incredibly cheap deal? I don't know. It depends on the recovery here, guys. You got to remember, all these companies that are losing money, cutting their dividends, they're not going to come back overnight. Like even the airlines, they're not coming back overnight. They're going to have to make up for the debt that they're taking on now. And the economy isn't just going to start up overnight. It's probably going to be a good 3, 6, maybe even 12 months for everything to kind of normalize again. So it's going to be neat to see what happens with the oil sector overall. Many of you know I avoid it like the plague, but if you want some really good insight on the oil company, I suggest you go listen to a guy by the name of Matt Money. He works for BP. He's a petroleum engineer. He's like the god of oil, the oil baron. So I suggest you go check his channel out. Now, taking a look at some of the real estate investment trusts, guys, this is where people get real sketched out, because a lot of these guys are going to be cutting dividends, and some of the scariest REITs you can own right now are senior housing property trusts, and Wells Tower is no exception to this, guys, considering this pandemic is hitting some of the elderly the hardest, and it's the saddest thing ever to watch these retirement homes getting locked down and people literally dropping like flies. I live really close to a retirement home that has some of the highest outbreak ratings right now, and they've had 15 people pass away in that home. It's not only terribly sad to think about, it's even worse as an investment if you have any investments in these companies. And over the long term, we all have to get old. We're probably all going to need some kind of assistance, but this is just an utter disaster. I mean, to have these kind of headlines surrounding these companies, to be an employee for one of these companies right now, it's got to be very rocky, very terrifying, and my heart goes out to all those frontline workers that are trying to help the elderly. So this is probably going to be one of the hardest hit sectors amongst everything right now. So it is by far no means a surprise that they're going to be cutting their dividend. In fact, they probably don't even want to be thinking about distributions right now until they can resolve this and kind of go back to a baseline, let alone trying to keep the employees on the ground floor with this stuff, guys. Unbelievable stuff. If you have any way in your community of supporting these people, whether it's donating to maybe some of those masks, anything you can do, I mean, help these kind of companies out, because they're going to need it and their employees are going to need it even more. So moving outside of that bad news, I finally got my government check. We can see that right there, that fat 2K number. And what am I going to be doing with it? Well, I'm really happy that I don't owe anybody any more money, ladies and gentlemen. I have paid my taxes. I have finalized paying my accountants. I'm not deferring any of these bills. Forget that, guys. I want to get all my bills paid and out of the way so I can move on with my life and spend this money as I please. I am going to be using, however, a large majority of this check is an emergency fund, because most of those things that I had to pay really drain my accounts. I'm probably going to sock away about $1,000 to $1,500 of it just into my savings. I'm going to forget about it and just leave it there in case things continue to get worse going forward. I'm going to take $500 of it, depending on how the markets react over the next few days, and I'm going to be dumping it into one of these three companies, probably all three of these companies if I'm being honest. And we're going to start with my favorite REIT, one of my REITs that is still paying dividends. It hasn't done any dividend cuts. I just got the announcement that they're going to be paying their distributions here going forward, and they've announced those dates. And taking a look, guys, RioCan is one of the hardest hit real estate companies out there, because a lot of people think this company is really based around malls, and yes, they do own some malls. They have some of the top real estate in Canada and also some of the top tenants in Canada, and I think they only announced like a 2 to 3% discrepancy rating of people that are asking for deferrals on their mortgage payments or their rental payments. This company has no real problems right now, and considering it's paying an 8.7% dividend yield, I kind of compare it to O Realty Income in the US. Now, I would love to own some O Realty Income, and I'm considering it on the fence here, guys, if it drops even a little bit more. It's just the fact that I have maxed out my tax-free savings account, and if I were to buy O Realty Income in a regular investment account, I got to pay withholding tax over the border, withholding tax 15%, and then I have to pay income tax on it. So I would lose about 40 or 50% of that dividend, as I mentioned in the past. So RioCan is on the top of my buy list, guys. I will be picking some of this up no matter what, probably in the next day or two. The other stock that I'm going to be paying most attention to is going to be Facebook here as well. If Facebook can take another nice dip back into the 160 range, I want to buy it back because I had to pay taxes for over contributing to my RRSP, some penalties, which I do expect to get back in the following year. But for the time being, I'm losing out on something like $800 to $1,000 worth of shares in Facebook. So at some point here, I do want to pick up some more Facebook stock and rebuild that position to where it was. And I'd love to see it drop below from where I sold it out at when I was transferring it out of that account, which I believe was right around $172. And then I bought it back, I think, at 172, 173. I got real lucky with that, but would love to see it dip lower. And that is at the top of my buy list as well. And then the final stock that I'm going to try and pick up during this pandemic is Wells Fargo. We know the banking and the financial sector is getting slaughtered right now. Wells Fargo hasn't announced a dividend cut, which came as a bit of a shock to me, if I'm being honest. This is a company that I already think is on large discount, considering I'm not looking at the time right now with the revenues that they're losing. I want to skip forward 2 or 3 years and see where this company is going to be sitting, because I honestly think this is a company that could easily rebound back to being a $40 or even a $50 stock. They've just had one bad headline after another, just constantly suppressing the stock price, leading them into a PE ratio of 9 right now. So any banks out there, even the Canadian banks, I love them. I'm picking up all of them because I have them all set up on drips right now. So this month, I will be getting some shares paid out in Bank of Nova Scotia, Canadian Imperial Bank. I already got shares paid out in my utilities like Northland Power, and along with RioCan paid me out in some shares. I'm going to be leaving my entire drip system set up. So no matter what, I am buying shares at whatever the prices are at. But in the meantime, I'm still going to stack some cash. I'm going to be approaching this very cautiously because I just think the market's rebounded really fast. But these 3 specific companies aren't on any real rebounds. Facebook's up a little more than I'd like, but RioCan and Wells Fargo, I don't think I'm going to have a problem pulling the plug on that over the next 2 days. But I'd love to know, what are you guys doing with your government check? Let me know in that comment section below. Consider slapping that like. Stay cool, stay awesome, and I look forward to catching you tomorrow.